Well, I finally tackled a project that I have been meaning to do for months. Hey, I'm Janelle and this is toDIYfor, and I honestly was hoping that I could find an old coffee table and then just kind of refinish it off of Facebook Marketplace. That wasn't working, so I just bit the bullet and I went out and I bought the wood for this project, and it is so much cheaper than I realized. It wasn't too hard to put this together, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, although the stain isn't quite how I wanted. I did a very interesting technique to get to the color of table that I got to. Not entirely what I was after, but I'm very happy with how stable, sturdy, and just like the whole look of this table. So let's get into it.
So down below I will leave all of the wood that I used. This is a 2x10 that I already had at home, and I'm cutting it into 13-inch pieces just because that's what I had, and I'm using my speed square to do this. But the top of the board is the only thing I actually purchased, which was a single 8-foot board that was a 2x12. So that's what this is here. I actually got them to cut it for me at Home Depot, which you can always do if you don't have a saw at home. And right now I'm marking every 4 inches. Here I'm using my speed square to make sure that I am doing this all in the center of the board, and then I'm going to go through and mark those points again so I know exactly where I need to drill. Now I don't know if this was completely necessary, but I thought it was a good idea to attach these 2 boards that were going to be on the top and to do it fairly seamlessly. So this is a dowel, and I cut these down into 2-inch pieces. Here I have marked my drill 1 inch down so I know how far to drill, because this dowel will then go 1 inch in between the boards on each side, like so. So I ended up putting in twice as many holes as I needed to. When I put this together, it was a little tricky. On camera, it looks good because I already managed to get it together prior to this just to test it out. So I took out half of the dowels that I had actually drilled in there. They're each glued in there, and there's glue in between, and it's sandwiched together pretty good, but you got to be very careful with how you're drilling your holes in order for this to line up really well. So after a little bit, I was able to get it all worked out, and this holds pretty well. I'm going to let that dry overnight. And then here are the legs. Now this is a 2x10 board. I do wish I had thicker, wider legs, but I already had this wood at home, and that's why I'm using this. So I'm simply going to glue these 2 pieces together to make it look like we have some thick wood legs on the bottom, and I'm going to clamp those overnight or put something heavy on over top of them, and that will get them sandwiched together. So now with the legs, I'm going to use my pocket hole driller. This is going to make it look fairly seamless. You're not really going to see how this attaches. Really love how this works. It's a simple little contraption you can buy at Home Depot, and you just clamp it on here. And I'm just going to drill in 2 pocket holes on each side of each leg, and this is how we're going to attach the legs to the top of it. So I'm just going to draw in where I want them. I think I went in about 6 or so inches, screwing that into place, and it looks fairly seamless when I'm done. Now to hide that little gap there, we're going to put some wood filler in, and this is only to make this bottom piece look like it is one solid piece of wood. Now this is an optional step, but I wanted to kind of rough up some of the edges, make them rounded, make it look like it was a little bit aged. So I'm going ahead and scraping off some of the edges here so it's not completely squared, using the wire brush to add some scratches. You can use the hammer. You can do this as much or as little as you like, but I would suggest doing it before you do the major sanding, because that way if you make any sort of mark that's like too much, the sanding will kind of tame that down. So after sanding the entire project a couple of times with the final grit being 220, I'm going to add a little bit of white paint to some water, basically doing a whitewash on this, and just gonna rub it in with this cloth. Now this was 100% an experiment. I wanted the stain to be lighter than what it would be if you were to put this on fresh wood. It did have that effect, but I'm not entirely sure that I love the final look of this. So what I'm working here after that all dried with the whitewash is my red mahogany stain that I've used on a number of projects in my home. And we're going to stain over top of this. And you'll see that this stain does not sink into the wood like it would have if I hadn't have painted it. So I'm rubbing this in. It's a very light, it's a much lighter version of this stain. but it kind of made it really purpley. Like the red tones in this stain came out almost purpley, which I'm not really a fan of. So after I stained this entire thing and allowed that to dry, I then decided to sand it back a little bit. And you can kind of see, I don't know, it's a weird color here. So I sanded it back a little bit, and then I went over it with another stain that added in some more warmer yellow tones. And I don't recall what the stain was, but it was a different stain that was a little bit darker and had some more of those warm yellow tones in it. And I ultimately got a color that I was more a fan of. Still not entirely the full look that I was going for here, but it is what it is. So to finish off this project, you're gonna go ahead and do some polyurethane coats over top. I did 3 coats on the top of this, 2 coats everywhere else, and of course make sure that you are doing a light sand in between to get that smooth finish. And this is my completed coffee table. So what do you think? I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, the stain, the coloring, not quite exactly what I wanted. Maybe I probably should have went out and bought a different color stain, but I was just trying to work with what I already had. I still ultimately though do love the look of it, and I think it has a little bit of an age distressed look to it. It fits nice in this room, really inexpensive to make. Like I said, I actually only purchased 1 board to make this, so it was around $20 for the boards just for the top. If you're going to be purchasing this all in total, you need to buy the stain and all of those other things. It is going to be a more expensive project, but keep in mind that, you know, the stain, the polyurethane, the pocket hole driller, you can continue to reuse. And I would suggest making the legs thicker and wider, because this, you know, tends to tip just a little bit when my dog bumps into it. That's it for this week's DIY. Let me know what you thought. I'll be back next week with another one. Cheers.